So the next speaker is Leda Munoz from Costa Rica. She's the executive director of the Omar Dengo Foundation there. And the work in Costa Rica has started quite a few years before Thailand. And I remember that during the first few years, when we were still very confused about what constructionism is and how do you actually implement it if you want to do it in schools, we went to Costa Rica. We had one person traveling all the way there just to see what this is all about. So we've known the work of the Omar Dengo Foundation for a long, long time, and it's an honor that we have a speaker from the foundation with us today. Leda is in addition to being the executive director of the foundation, she's also a professor at the Faculty of Medicine of the University of Costa Rica. So please welcome Leda. We may be setting things up a little bit right now, so I think I might have some time for some housekeeping. So, very quickly, the proceedings are online, so if you're interested in that. It's also available on a USB drive at the registration desk. It's not free. But the thing about the proceeding is that it's just a draft right now. There might have been some formatting changes that happened because of the merging of all the files. So I would encourage you to take a look at your paper, your submission, and please email me if you see something that is not right there. We hope to have the final version with an ISBN number ready a few weeks after the conference. Poster sessions, you probably see that it's right outside where the break area is. If you haven't put up your posters, please do so because the session is this afternoon. I think we're ready.
Ready? Thank you. Well, thank you. It is really my honor to be here. Thank you very much for this opportunity of sharing with you the story of the project in Costa Rica. And indeed, it started a long time ago. In 1987, a group of academics and entrepreneurs were called by the recently elected president to shape a project to provide computers to school and children. See if I can read and move. This early decision to invest in digital technologies and enrich children's learning opportunity has to be pondered against the background of the country's historical determination of making education a pillar of its development strategy, an achievement included in the country's 1847 constitution, well ahead of many countries in the region that declared that education ought to be universal, free, and state financed. The funding group, as we call, start by asking some fundamental questions. Computers in school for what? How to do it? 29 years later, the ideas that inspire the answers to those questions are still sound and valid, if not more. From the onset, it was clear that a solid theoretical and pedagogical basis should guide the design of the project, and that it ought to be focused on the use of computers as tools to develop high-level thinking skills and on training teachers in the methodology to use rather than on the computer's hardware and software. This understanding was a key factor to select the pedagogical proposal of Simon Popper, whose influence in the design and initial implementation of the project was strategic. So the decision was made to start introducing computers at the elementary school level, contrary to most initiatives at that time that work at the secondary level, and to create a place for children to build their knowledge through exploration and ludic activities, as Popper proposed. Logo was the ideal tool for that purpose, as it created what Popper called the conditions or micro-worlds for students to root intellectual models. In fact, Logo delivered both a powerful instrument and a learning proposal for promoting mental processes and for solving problems, as Popper noted. Hence, Programming elementary schools with logo and a project-based learning approach constituted the core of the soon-to-be-launched project. The project continues focus on children's use of programming to develop their creativity and thinking skills, has distinguished it from other projects in the region, and it proves to be still a force as more and more countries are launching initiatives to introduce these types of learning opportunities in their curricula. Concerning the need to answer the how the project in terms of organization, structure, and dimensions, it was clear to the founding group that the model should be able to overcome bureaucratic obstacles and political cycles. Thus, a non-for-profit foundation was established, the Omar Dengo Foundation, to take on the development and implementation of the program in partnership with the Ministry of Education. In order to guarantee the link with the two organizations, the Ministry of Education, the minister was initially appointed head of the foundation's board of director. This public-private arrangement provided a good combination that included the needed efficiency with the relevance of what we were doing. So what is the Omar Dengo Foundation? Well, it's a nonprofit organization that develops and implements innovative education proposals focused on learners and the appropriation of digital technologies to stimulate cognitive capacities, collaboration, and innovation. And that's, in other words, the mission. So let me tell you how we start implementing this idea. The initial phase started in 1988 when the Educational Informatics Laboratory, as we call it, were established, the very first one. We started with 57 elementary schools at that time. 2 lessons a week were devoted to students to work at these computer labs, and a tutor for each lab was appointed among the school's teachers. At that time, the foundation assumed all the implementation components, financial resources, training of teachers, selection of computers, configuration processes, and so on. The schools and their local communities were required to facilitate and provide conditions for setting up a classroom to house the school's computer lab. And thus, gently but firmly, the project became a reality, with Logo as the core language and learning tool. So the next 10 years, I will summarize them as growth and sustainability. After the initial launching of the project at schools, it became evident that the educational proposal was difficult to implement. Although the initial enthusiasm of students, teachers, and principals to the novelty of the proposal counterbalanced the difficulties. The educational proposal began to be enriched by complementing the original concept through the introduction of robotics and telematics and other things. Extracurricular clubs were also created in some cases to facilitate the incorporation of these new options, where students will voluntarily participate in a non-formal complementary learning opportunity. Eventually, new teaching and learning scenarios emerged, especially at the we call multi-grade elementary schools. These are very, very small schools, usually in rural areas, usually with one teacher that takes care of all grades. However, to facilitate the growth and sustainability of the project, other things were needed in addition to a solid pedagogical approach, and I take the words of our keynote speaker. So the foundation then started building an articulated and efficient program architecture around the following pillars. A continuous training support and follow-on system for teachers. The system comprised the provision of an initial training program for incoming teachers, annual mandatory training workshops, and continuous pedagogical face-to-face support from a team of advisors who visit the schools with regularity. Specialized computer lab teacher position was lobbied and eventually created by the Ministry of Education, and the education departments of the main universities also designed and began offering educational informatics training programs, initially with the guide and support of the foundation. A sustainable, a constant financing source was the second issue. After 10 years of launching the program, it managed to grow and be available to 181 schools, benefiting 148,000 students at that time. In 1998, 10 years later, due to the program's efficiency, performance, the Costa Rica government decided to strengthen its investment in it. And in order to provide appropriate financial support, the Ministry of Education began allocating annual financial transferences from the national budget. So the foundation continued bringing additional financial resources into the project, mainly to incubate new ideas, to support research and evaluation, and so on. But the main funding started at that year to come from the Ministry of Education. And the third pillar was the logistic, administrative, and technical services that were needed to dissolve, starting from a small, contained initial effort to a large, scalable initiative. And finally, a research, monitoring, and evaluation process to provide feedback to what we were doing in schools. And then the second decade, and I'm going really quick with this story, we can summarize as the creation of the national program. By the year 2002, the Ministry of Education and the country's Superior Council of Education decided to transfer to the foundation the efforts that the minister had initially implemented of bringing computers to a secondary level schools. Remember that we start with elementary schools. So the decision was based on evaluation that show evidence of very limited results from the minister's project, and the need to have a more articulated national effort to undertake these initiatives in the public school system. So the National Program of Educational Informatics was created, integrated all levels from kindergarten on. And a diversification effort was also a continuous process, not only in the first 10 years. For instance, we start providing entrepreneurship skills through a simulation program with the computers. Thank you. In 2008, the foundation started a review process with the intent to generate a more precise and coherent and integrated educational proposal for all levels, with appropriate scaffolding to guide the teachers' work at the computer labs. The goal was to clearly define the students' minimum learning outcome expected to occur at each level, and to provide guidelines to the teachers, especially the newcomers. The initial training of teachers by the university was not providing the required profiles, and still is not. And the needed changes are difficult to promote, given important structural limitations, such as the minimum requirement faced by university students wishing to follow a career in education, and the usually low demanding training being offered to them. In addition to this condition of limited initial training of a large proportion of teachers, the foundation experience allowed it to gain a better understanding of the general scaffolding needed for teachers to implement the ambitious proposal. So by the end of this period, the program had continued to grow, strengthen his teacher support, and it had at that time 974 schools and 450,000 students. So the last 5 years, probably we can summarize as a process of evolution and permanency. The evolution really has been marked in these last 5 years by the eruption of the mobile digital technologies, along with the broader possibilities to use them in a regular classroom, and widely available practical knowledge on how to use them to promote the new pedagogies needed for the 21st century. Also, the increasing international call to have every child learning how to program and develop their own software, what was being recently named as the computational thinking, and Popper usually will refer as a computer culture. And Lastly, the development of applications and knowledge based on digital learning platforms and their potential to enhance learning opportunities both for students and teachers. So let me try to explain you what we've been doing the last 5 days facing these new possibilities. The first thing was the effort of the program to promote the use of digital technologies in regular classrooms and not only in the computer lab, thus aiming to enrich content learning by key subject areas and develop strategic skills for students. At this moment, students and teachers in over 1,000 elementary schools and secondary schools have been provided with laptops to be used in their classroom and outside of them. And the foundation goal is to be able to have all schools in 2 or 3 years period. Second, 2 main pedagogical schemes have been explored. The one-to-one laptop programs aim at facilitating ubiquitous access to technology to all students in rural areas, thus allowing students in such areas to experience the potential of the computer as a personal tool for learning, production, and creation. And a second scheme in less rural areas is the laptop car programs installed in schools with a focus in reinforcing research, reasoning, and creative skills in curriculum subjects such as language, mathematics, and science. These approaches have been designed to promote equity in a society like Costa Rica, which has been easily and rapidly adopting new technologies, with the majority of homes nowadays having a computer and internet access. So the one-to-one laptop programs have been intended, are focused on the rural areas where the digital gap is still deeper. Okay. A second complementary educational strand, the program has also been working in the consolidation of the educational proposal in the labs, in the computer labs, the initial proposal, by enriching and deepening it with new conceptual approaches and experiences that have evolved in the last years. The program visualized an enriched computer lab proposal no longer constricted to a physical facility, the computer lab, seeking to benefit all students in the country, drawing on its long experience in teaching programming and the use of technology to promote students' high-order capacity. The program is now looking into new and exciting perspectives such as physical computing and learning by making, while strengthening its learning approach to problem-solving, computational concepts, and computational practices. A third educational strand is a program that we are just designing to produce a new learning extracurricular proposal for students to span their learning possibilities according to their individual interests and talents and reinforce their self-learning capacities. Most of these new learning opportunities are delivered online through a digital learning platform, and we're still building, constructing that. These 3 strands are unified under an integrated model, a well-defined strategy to use technologies as thinking tools to stimulate development specific capacities and competences for the modern society. The configuration of this educational offer has required to design a new model of professional development for teachers, which rely more and more on virtual platforms. As the program becomes bigger and bigger, we need to support our training opportunities on virtual platforms. Okay. In summary, what are we doing today? We have a public-private partnership with the Ministry of Education and Omar Dengo Foundation. This is like a marriage. We know, right, for divorce, it's not easy, but it has survived at 29 years, so it's a sustainable model. A growing national coverage. We have, at this point, covering about 82% of the population of students in the public sector. And the public education is the dominant publication. Over 95% of students go to public schools. A particular use of ICTs aim at developing cognitive and social skills, and certainly a strong emphasis on equity and inclusion. We have also an integrated implementation model that covers all the major things that are need to, in order for this to happen. And actually, with time, we are getting more and more roles and not less. And we thought we were getting, with time, less and less models, and the Ministry of Education will maybe be able to start helping us with some. But it seems like we are helping more and more to them. And that's fine, because that's how things get done. For instance, we are reaching rural communities now where electricity is not there. So we are working with engineers to put electricity or solar panels and do all these infrastructural processes that really should be done by the Ministry of Education. We have a robust and diversified offer that covers all cycles, as you can see there. And we have a clear learning objectives. And these are different names for things that we've been hearing already in the morning, you know. Our aims is to help kids to gain thinking skill, living skills, working skills, and working tools. And we try to do that through a organization of our proposal in 4 dimensions. Digital citizenship, thinking and problem-solving skills, entrepreneurship and innovation, and digital technology ownership. And we want from each dimensions, you know, our aim is that kids will use the technology in the digital citizenship to participate in the local and global community. And in the thinking and problem skills dimension, to use technology to think, research, and solve problems, drawing on different formal thinking frameworks. And the entrepreneurship and innovation, we want kids to use technology to create new ideas and ventures and to lead them to success. And finally, in the digital technology ownership, we expect kids to use technology to create useful products and to learn how to use tools effectively with an understanding of the digital system. And all these 4 dimensions are crossed by 6 attributes that are approached transversally, if you will: communication, collaboration, creativity, information literacy, self-direction, and ethics and security. So the original educational informatics lab is still there and getting better. We have clear expected learning outcomes in there. We have pedagogical methodologies, and programming is a core learning tool there. And we have a lot of support for teachers, like the didactic guides, monitoring and formative evaluation, and teacher training support. And we are working in this new and rich proposal development with the development of computational and design thinking skills and concept, with the learning. I'm going too fast. With the learning domains, strengthening the programming concepts, data representation and modeling, and the didactics moving more from learning by doing to learning by making. We have a continuous teachers training support. We design an online learning platform that was specially designed for teachers, you know, with them helping us in the design. And we have a professional development program that's growing and trying to get better. And we have materials, and we have learning communities, and we have a lot of things for the teachers there. Personal publications, products, follow-up and coaching processes, and so on. So with this quick description, you can ask me, well, where are the results? And do you have challenges? In the question and the answer for challenges is yes, many. For results, I want to show you, well, the map there is Costa Rica, and the yellow points are where we are, and the green areas are national parks, so we shouldn't be there. So as you can see, we're trying to really complete universal coverage. And this is how coverage has been growing through time, throughout the 29 years. And as you can see, this marriage, it's there, it's still working every time. So we have, at this point, 2,523 schools in our program and over 580,000 students. Okay, do we have results of learning outcomes? Throughout the years, the program has continually monitored and evaluated its educational proposal. Although a large-scale evaluation of student learning outcome has been hard to organize, among other things, due to the difficulties of having access or developing the appropriate assessment instruments capable of measuring the kind of dispositions and deep thinking skills that we are aiming at. However, we're working hard on that, and last year we have a study in which almost 10,000 students that has just finished elementary school participate, trying to evaluate the learning levels based on the program's didactic guidelines and the learning outcomes framework that we have. And this is hard to read, perhaps, but at the end, the evaluation results show a statistical, significant, and positive accumulative effect in students participating during the several years in the program. In the dimensions that we're looking at. So, like in the productivity dimensions, if every year will count, but if they stay the 6 years, the effect of the accumulative effect of participating in the program was 64%. And the same for the other dimensions, for instance, for the problem solving and research. So this is new data. We're still working in the publication, but it's really giving us, we're very happy that we've been able to measure a contribution. With regard to other dimensions that the initial project wanted, like economic, social, and educational domains, the results vary. In the economic domain, we can say that the program's impact on the national productive structure and economy has been regarded by the country to be clearly positive. Though it's hard to rigorously assess it, the fact of having a whole new generation of children who got familiarized with technology much sooner than other children in the region, and who learn programming at a very early age, and had the experience of being in control of the machine and not in a position of just receiving orders from it. It's commonly recognized one of the reasons, one key factor why Costa Rica economy changed in these 25 years from an agriculture exporting economy to services and especially high technology exporting services and products. Other very visible impact of the program has been its contribution to reducing the digital gap inside the country, and that's also been recognized. On the contrary, the renovation of the school system, which was one of the ambitious ideas of the funding group, has proven to be a very difficult goal to achieve. To begin with, it was perhaps too optimistic goal, notwithstanding the powerful message broadcasted from the Educational Informatics Lab. We believe that a synergistic and multi-dimensional plan is really needed to cause the overall system to change. The public-private partnership established with the Ministry of Education has proven to provide strengths and weaknesses, but the overall balance is very positive. We certainly have a sustainable program that is continuously growing, and we have a good articulation with the overall country's educational policy. Nevertheless, the political cycles has proven to be a challenge in processes, with new authorities coming every 4 years or earlier, because sometimes the Ministry of Education changes more often. And we have to go through a very intense transitional route every time. This includes explaining the program, the objectives, the results, mutually understanding the role of each partner, synchronizing the program with the political priorities of each administration, and yet maintaining the fidelity of the program's objectives and its epistemological framework. And these are critical issues. The economic limitations of the country has resulted, resulted in a slower progress of the program that most of us would have wanted. So 100% coverage is still a goal, and we are really hoping to reach it very soon. In addition, new requirements have emerged, such as access to broadband and good quality internet services, and that's part of the new challenges. But certainly improving the training of teachers, both initial and continuous training, is probably the most determining factor in any educational proposal, and certainly it is critical in our program. The complementary efforts that the Foundation has developed in this field are important, but they do not substitute a sound training process along the 4 or 5 years at the formal university education. On the other hand, we need to better understand how to use new technologies to support teachers' training process. And that's part of the new proposal. That's part of what we're trying to do. So our current challenges can be summarized in these 3 ideas: to complete the coverage and reach all these rural, isolated communities that still need to be incorporated into the program, resolve the good access to internet for all, and to still keep working the professional development opportunities. So I think this will give you a summary view of what we think we've done so far. In terms of outputs, meaning contributions to the educational policy, we clearly have learning expectations in a key learning domain. We have an educational proposal based upon a solid conceptual and methodological framework. We have an efficient and sustainable institutional architecture and management model, and we have systematic monitoring and evaluation. In terms of outcomes, as direct or indirect beneficiaries, we have a largely documented effort on student self-efficacy that I didn't talk about, but we have data on that. A positive and accumulative effect on dimensions such as problem-solving skills, and I show you a little bit of the data. An evident, though hard to measure, impact on the national productive structure and economy, and a knowledge contribution to reducing the digital gap inside the country. In addition, the Foundation does a lot of other things to other communities and groups besides the public schools, and I really don't have time to go through it, but just wanted to mention. After 29 years, we've done a lot of mistakes, and we have learned a lot of things, and we have a few things that we've done right. And I think sharing those lessons are important. First is understanding that digital gap is just another expression of a deeper and complex gap, which is social exclusion, and we should really try to work on that. Second is that the distribution of technologies in schools alone does not impact necessarily learning outcomes, that you need clear learning objectives and methodologies to really impact learning outcomes. And teachers, at least in our country, need to learn how to use the new technologies to mediate the classroom, and we need to support them in that process continuously. Introductions of technology in schools need short and middle-term planning, and very often we forget about the middle and we start with the short-term planning only. In our case, scaling and sustainability was an issue because that was the mandate that we have as a foundation. So resolving that issue from the very beginning was very important. And if any program has that as a goal, they should work on that from the beginning. Logistic and administrative issues are important. It might not be what we like to do, what we love to do, but we should take care of them. And then the educational design and the organizational model should be able to adapt to changes through time. And you know, we have 29 years and many, many changes have occurred. So we need the organization to be able to have critical thinking, evaluation, research, and development to really be able to respond to those changes. And for all those reasons, collaboration, international cooperation, and accountability are key elements. So I want to finish with a very short video. And even I got, because of the help of Eleonora, a picture of Popper when he was in Costa Rica, so I'll show you at least one picture. So we have many, I just didn't think about bringing them. But I want to finish first, before the video, with a phrase of Omar Dengo. He was a great teacher, a philosopher, a thinker, a writer, and he said, I need to read it, the future must be dream, desire, love, created. It must be plucked from the soul of the present generations with all the gold gathered in the past, with all the vehement yearning to create the great work of individuals and nations. So, thank you very much, and let me show you the picture, and Eleonora can help me with that. If you don't recognize people, that's Popper there with some other familiar faces about 29 years ago, 28 years ago. Eleonora, where are you? Thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong. And a little video maybe to, oops, what happened? Didn't get it.
Costa Rica, un país de 4.6 millones de habitantes, con la educación como estandarte y 95% de alfabetización, redefinió la informática educativa en 1988, al crear el Programa Nacional de Informática Educativa, un esfuerzo pionero entre el Ministerio de Educación Pública y la Fundación Omar Dengo. Con 28 años de crecimiento y evolución continua, el PRONIEMEP-FOD desarrolla propuestas educativas apoyadas en la tecnología para desarrollar capacidades estratégicas en sus estudiantes y docentes del país. Además de la introducción innovadora de la programación y el desarrollo del pensamiento lógico en las escuelas, el PRONIEMEP-FOD desarrolla programas de robótica, ciencia, emprendimiento, experimentación tecnológica y ciudadanía, que actualmente benefician en 80% de los estudiantes de la educación pública. Gracias a este proyecto nacional, 550.000 estudiantes se benefician con el equipamiento tecnológico, soporte técnico y pedagógico para desarrollar habilidades de comunicación, colaboración, creatividad, autogestión del aprendizaje y uso seguro de las tecnologías.
Hay que programar juegos bonitos para las personas, que les guste, todo eso. El proyecto de campamento nos sirve mucho para aprender cosas muy buenas. Podemos aprender a programar juegos, hasta podemos programar celulares, compu, para que no le meta virus, todo eso. Entonces, estamos programando un juego para que las personas les guste.
Hacer una aplicación paso a paso. Entonces, todos los juegos que nosotros siempre vemos tienen algo por detrás, como nos decía Alan. Es, digamos, como la cara de adelante son los layers, los layouts y todo eso, pero atrás siempre hay algo que lo está controlando, como si, digamos, si fueran títeres, uno nada más ve el espectáculo ahí donde se mueven, pero por detrás hay gente manejándolos. Entonces eso es programar, hacer los códigos para que eso funcione, la lógica del juego.
Bueno, yo estoy haciendo el juego de las ranas saltareras.
Ajá.
Y entonces, bueno, estoy utilizando eso para poderme guiar cómo programar los movimientos que hagan las ranas.
Ajá.
Digamos, en este caso, las ranas azules serían las amarillas acá.
Ajá.
Y las rojas serían las verdes.
Ajá.
Entonces, yo he ido programando con los códigos cuáles son los movimientos que quiero que hagan las ranas.
Ajá.
Entonces, digamos, estas ranas de acá, yo les he dicho que se vayan moviendo. Algunas no se ven. Digamos, esta llega hasta acá y brinca a esto.
Ajá.
Y esta está programada.
Es así como el Programa Nacional de Informática Educativa lleva la tecnología a todos los rincones del país para disminuir la brecha digital y ayudar a construir una Costa Rica que le pueda hacer frente a los retos del siglo XXI.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leda. Before you leave the stage, I would like to invite Ajahn Yupin Trangkatan, the provost of the Darun Sikalai School, to present her with a gift of appreciation.
Oh, thank you very much.
All right, so now we will break for lunch unless Richard has a question. Okay. Can we get a microphone, please? Yep. มีไมค์ไหมครับ ขอไมค์ตัวหนึ่งครับ
Thank you. Sure, sorry.
Okay, my name is Richard Noss from the University of London. First, just let me say that was an inspiring, wonderful talk. 29 years of development is something to really shout about, and so please let's shout. But I just want to ask you really for help. You said twice in your talk something like, this educational initiative has been responsible for the development of the Costa Rican economy in various ways. And I'm sure that's true, but the people I speak to don't care what I think or even what you think. They want evidence.
Yes.
Do you have any that would help me?
No, for that, no. And it's not, that the program is not the only variable, but we think it's a very contributing important variable. I tell you what people like Intel or Cisco or HP or Boston's Medical Instruments say when they decide to work in Costa Rica and they bring their big activities. And they say Costa Rica is not a cheap place. Labor is very expensive in Costa Rica, and for some of you that have been there, you can be, you can tell it is very expensive. And the reasons we are coming to Costa Rica is two. We have stable political conditions, we have a long-lasting democracy, and we have good human resources. And so we don't have evidence, but we just know that those things were happening in parallel, and that people from outside think the human resources that we find in Costa Rica are very qualified. And I don't mean having university degrees. Of course, you find engineers and whatever, but a lot of the people that they hire are people with only high school level, and yet they find it, a good investment to work there. So yes, we don't have evidence in that way.
But maybe you will.
Pardon me?
Maybe you will.
Maybe.
Sorry, I didn't facilitate the Q&A session, but it's just that we are out of time. So it's going to be lunch, so you feel free to catch up with Leda there. We